If you were alive in the summer of 1981, you witnessed a moon landing. Not the one with Neil Armstrong taking a giant leap for mankind. That had happened 12 years earlier in the silent vacuum of space. No, this landing happened inside your living room on a greeny, convex glass screen. On August 1st, 1981, at exactly 12:01 a.m., a television channel flickered to life with footage of an Apollo astronaut planting a flag on the lunar surface. But the flag didn't have the stars and stripes of a nation. It had a giant, blocky letter, M. A voice announced, somewhat awkwardly, "Ladies and gentlemen, rock and roll," and then the guitar riff started. The first music video played was a prophecy, "Video Killed the Radio Star" by the Buggles. At that moment, the world changed. It wasn't just a new channel, it was a cultural nuclear bomb. For the next 2 decades, those 3 letters, MTV, would define what was cool, what was loud, and what mattered. It was the heartbeat of youth culture. It was the monoculture. Do you remember coming home from school, throwing your backpack on the floor, and turning on the TV just to see the top 10 countdown? Do you remember waiting for hours just to catch 3 minutes of Nirvana or Madonna or Guns N' Roses? Do you remember Carson Daly in Times Square with thousands of screaming fans outside the window, stopping traffic in the busiest city on Earth? MTV wasn't just television, it was a shared language. If you didn't watch it, you didn't exist. But today, if you tune into that same channel, the music is gone. The astronauts have left the building. The M no longer stands for music. Instead, you will find a graveyard of reality shows. You will find endless marathons of ridiculousness, clips of people falling off skateboards, and scripted drama about teenagers on a beach in New Jersey. The generation that grew up shouting, "I want my MTV," is now left asking a different question. Where did the music go? Most people think MTV died because of the internet. They think YouTube killed the video star. But the truth is much darker. MTV didn't die of natural causes. It was murdered from the inside. It was a slow, calculated suicide driven by corporate executives who realized that cheap drama was more profitable than expensive art. This is the story of how the most influential brand in music history sold its soul, lost its way, and became a zombie of its former self. This is the rise, the revolution, and the tragic silence of MTV. To understand the magnitude of the loss, we have to remember what the world looked like before the astronaut landed. In the late 1970s, music was something you heard. It was an auditory experience. You bought vinyl records, you listened to FM radio in your car, and maybe, if you were lucky, you saw a band live in concert once a year. Music lived in your ears. Then came Robert Pittman and a group of rogue executives who had a crazy idea. What if music could be something you watched? When they pitched the idea of a 24-hour music channel to cable providers, they were laughed out of the room. "Nobody will watch commercials for songs all day," they said. And honestly, in the beginning, it looked like a disaster. On launch day, MTV only had about 100 videos in their library. The production value was cheap. The VJs, video jockeys, were awkward. They operated out of a small studio in New Jersey that smelled like stale coffee and cigarettes. But they had something the radio didn't have. They had image. Suddenly, a band didn't just need a good song, they needed a look, they needed a concept. MTV took obscure British new wave bands like Duran Duran and A Flock of Seagulls, bands that American radio wouldn't touch, and made them superstars overnight, simply because they had interesting haircuts and weird artistic videos. The channel became a visual addiction. It broke the rules of engagement between the artist and the fan. But it also had to break the racial barrier of rock and roll. In the early days, MTV was criticized heavily for not playing black artists. It was a rock channel, and the executives were terrified of alienating their white suburban audience. But in 1983, Michael Jackson released the video for Billie Jean, and then the 14-minute short film for Thriller. It shattered the ceiling. The pressure became undeniable. MTV realized that great visuals transcended genre. When they finally embraced Michael Jackson, Prince, and Whitney Houston, the channel exploded into the stratosphere. By the mid-80s, MTV was no longer just a channel, it was the arbiter of taste. If a video got into heavy rotation, meaning it was played 6 or 8 times a day, that artist became a god. Madonna, Bon Jovi, Peter Gabriel, their careers were built on the foundation of that logo. But it wasn't just about the pop stars, it was about the weirdness. In the late 80s and early 90s, MTV began to experiment with animation and counterculture. They gave us liquid television. They gave us Beavis and Butthead, 2 crudely drawn teenagers who did nothing but sit on a couch and critique music videos. It was meta-commentary before we knew what that word meant. They gave us Daria, a cynical look at high school life that resonated deeply with a generation of disaffected youth. And then there was the news. Kurt Loder, a former Rolling Stone editor, became the most trusted newsman in America for anyone under the age of 30. When Kurt Loder interrupted the broadcast with MTV News Break, you stopped what you were doing. He covered the death of Kurt Cobain with more gravity and respect than CNN or the nightly news ever could. He brought politics to the youth, famously getting Bill Clinton to discuss his underwear preference on national television. MTV had become a legitimate political force. Rock the Vote wasn't just a slogan, it swayed elections. This power peaked in the late 1990s and early 2000s with TRL, Total Request Live. This was the apex of the monoculture. Every afternoon, millions of teenagers came home and watched the exact same thing at the exact same time. We watched Carson Daly count down the top 10 videos. We watched Eminem, Britney Spears, and Korn stand in that glass studio in Times Square, literally looking down on the world. It felt permanent. It felt like MTV would always be the center of the universe. It was the gatekeeper. If you wanted to be famous, you had to pass through those gates. But beneath the surface, a cancer was already growing. And ironically, it wasn't the music that would kill MTV. It was a show about 7 strangers picked to live in a house. The year was 1992. While Nirvana was redefining rock music on the main stage, MTV quietly launched a low-budget experiment called The Real World. The premise was simple. This is the true story of 7 strangers picked to live in a house and have their lives taped. No scripts, no actors, just raw human behavior. At the time, it seemed like a fascinating documentary experiment. It explored racism, sexuality, and conflict in a way that felt real and urgent. But for the executives at Viacom, MTV's parent company, The Real World revealed a financial secret that would doom the music industry. They discovered that producing a reality show was incredibly cheap. To air a music video, MTV had to navigate complex licensing agreements. But to air The Real World, they just needed a camera crew, a house, and some alcohol. More importantly, they noticed something about the ratings. When MTV played music videos, people had a tendency to change the channel as soon as a song came on that they didn't like. The viewership was passive. You watched until you got bored. But when The Real World was on, people stayed. They got hooked on the drama. They watched through the commercial breaks. This was the turning point. The data told the executives, music videos are risky. Reality TV is a guarantee. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the ratio began to shift. In the late 90s, you could still see music videos all day. By the mid-2000s, the videos were pushed to the early morning hours. The primetime slots were taken over by Punk'd, Pimp My Ride, Jackass, and My Super Sweet 16. The channel started chasing a new high. They realized that aspirational content, showing rich kids engaging in excess, was addictive. Cribs showed us the mansions of rappers, teaching us to worship wealth. Laguna Beach showed us the drama of wealthy California teens, blurring the lines between reality and soap opera. The M in MTV was starting to fade. The channel was no longer about celebrating art, it was about celebrating celebrity. It was no longer about the counterculture, it was about consumerism. And then came the final nail in the coffin, the internet. It is easy to blame Jersey Shore or Teen Mom for the death of MTV, but we have to look at the technology. In 2005, 3 former PayPal employees launched a website called YouTube. Before YouTube, if you wanted to see the music video for Toxic by Britney Spears, you had to turn on MTV and wait. You were at the mercy of the programmer. You had to sit through commercials and songs you hated, just hoping your favorite song would play. YouTube changed the equation. It gave us on-demand culture. Why wait for Carson Daly to play the video when you could type it into a search bar and watch it instantly? MTV found itself in an impossible position. They were a curator in a world that now demanded access. Their entire business model, being the gatekeepers of cool, was obsolete. The gate was gone. The walls had fallen down. So how did MTV react to this threat? Did they build their own streaming platform? Did they double down on live music events and become the Coachella of television? No, they panicked. And in their panic, they abandoned music entirely. In 2010, MTV quietly removed the words music television from their iconic logo. It was a subtle change, but it was a formal declaration of surrender. They admitted that the war was over. They pivoted 100% to reality TV. And not just the documentary-style reality of the early 90s. They went for the lowest common denominator. Jersey Shore became a global phenomenon, but it had absolutely nothing to do with the channel's heritage. It was trash TV, pure and simple. It was successful, yes, it made millions of dollars, but it destroyed the brand's integrity. It was the sugar rush before the crash. When the Jersey Shore hype faded, they had nothing left. The music fans had left for YouTube and Spotify. The reality TV fans had moved on to Bravo or Instagram. MTV was left in a void. If you turn on MTV right now, in the year 2024, you will see something truly depressing. You will likely see an episode of Ridiculousness. For those who don't know, Ridiculousness is a clip show where Rob Dyrdek watches viral internet videos. It is cheap, it is mindless, and it is endless. There are days where MTV airs Ridiculousness for 20 hours straight. Why? Because it is safe. It is comfort food for a dying cable audience. It requires zero attention span. It is background noise for empty living rooms. The channel that once premiered Thriller, the channel that gave us Nirvana Unplugged, the channel that launched the careers of Madonna and Beyoncé, has been reduced to a loop of people falling off trampolines. It is a zombie channel. It is walking and talking, but the soul is long dead. The tragedy is not just that a corporation lost its way. The tragedy is that we lost a communal space. When MTV died, the monoculture died with it. Today, music is fragmented. You listen to your Spotify Discover Weekly playlist, which is tailored specifically to your taste by an algorithm. I listen to my playlist. We are no longer listening to the same things. There is no longer a Times Square where we all gather to see what is number one. The algorithm gives us what we like, but MTV gave us what we needed to hear. It forced a metalhead to listen to Dr. Dre. It forced a pop fan to listen to Green Day. It created a cross-pollination of culture that simply doesn't exist in our siloed digital world. Consider the role of the music video director. In the 90s, MTV was a film school. Directors like Spike Jonze, Michel Gondry, and David Fincher cut their teeth making 3-minute masterpieces for MTV. They experimented with visual storytelling in ways that Hollywood films couldn't. Sabotage by the Beastie Boys wasn't just a promo clip, it was a high-octane 70s cop show parody. Virtual Insanity by Jamiroquai was a single-take marvel of practical effects. These videos were art. They were discussed at lunch tables and water coolers the next day. Today, music videos still exist on YouTube, but they lack the curation. They lack the scarcity that made them feel special. We scroll past them, we watch 10 seconds and click away. The reverence is gone. There's also the loss of the vibe. MTV wasn't just about the videos, it was about the spaces in between, the animated bumpers, the station IDs, the weird experimental shorts that played at 2 a.m. It felt like a club. It felt like you were part of a secret society, even though millions of other people were watching too. It had an aesthetic, grungy, chaotic, colorful, and raw. Now, everything is polished. Everything is high definition. Everything is safe. The rough edges of culture have been sanded down by corporate algorithms designed to maximize retention, not artistic expression. There's a famous quote from the artist Andy Warhol, who once had his own show on MTV called Andy Warhol's 15 Minutes. He said, "They always say time changes things, but you actually have to change them yourself." MTV changed the world. It taught us to look at music, not just hear it. It validated the weirdos, the outcasts, and the rebels. It was the campfire around which an entire global generation warmed their hands. But businesses are not people. They do not have loyalties. They have shareholders. And when the math said that music was no longer profitable, they unplugged the amplifier without a second thought. The astronaut is still on the moon, planting that flag, but the signal has faded into static. The revolution was televised until the ratings dropped, and then it was canceled. The M is still there, but it is a hollow shell, a fossil of a bygone era. It serves as a reminder that nothing in pop culture is permanent. Trends fade, formats die, and technology marches on, crushing everything in its path. But for those of us who were there, who remember the static clearing to reveal a new video by our favorite band, who remember the feeling of connection to a global beat, the silence is deafening. We have access to every song ever recorded in our pockets, yet we have never felt more disconnected from the music. We have everything, and yet we have nothing. We want our MTV back, but we know deep down that you can't go home again. The screen has gone dark, the music has stopped, and all that remains is the memory of a time when we were all watching the same moon landing